Hey guys, today is Thursday, March 25th, 2021, and we're just doing a quick video here about the news of today. Big news about climate change again. The Supreme Court has ruled that Ottawa's carbon tax is constitutional. It's a 6-3 decision. This is something that we've been looking for results in for at least the past, I want to say the past 3 years maybe. People have been talking about how this court battle would go. Basically, there's an argument between the federal government and at least 3 of the provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, ever since Doug Ford became premier, that the federal government did not have the authority to impose a carbon tax on the provinces as the law was written. The Supreme Court, however, has basically studied the law, and they say that basically because the federal government is allowed to pass laws under this clause of peace, order, and good government, the POG clause, if you will. This gives the federal government the authority to enact laws that deal with issues that concern the entire country. Now, the logic here obviously being that climate change or any environmental issue is not really an issue that can be solved within a province. You know, like if there's pollutants in one province, it will affect the climate in other provinces potentially. So logic here being climate is a federal issue, so any legislation on climate from the federal government should be seen as legitimate. Now, this kind of disagreement between the provinces, I'm honestly not too surprised by this decision. A lot of people could have seen this coming. The federal government usually has wide range when it comes to this kind of specific taxation, especially something where, you know, climate change is what's interesting in the ruling too is that the Wagner here, I guess Justice Wagner, he basically keeps going on about how climate change is like a huge threat, such a great threat, it demands a coordinated national approach. Now, you know, if we take the politics out of it, like the federal government does have the authority to do this, basically. But the reactions in the provinces obviously are much different. The way the law was structured actually was that it allowed, basically provinces themselves, individual provinces, they had the option of creating their own climate pricing, like carbon pricing plan for their level of jurisdiction, for the provincial level. But if they did not do so, then the federal government would come and impose their version of the carbon tax instead. And so that's kind of what's happening in Ontario. Ontario used to have a cap and trade system prior to Doug Ford winning the election, and basically Doug Ford has spent the last 3 years, here's a nice picture of him with Jason Kenney. Basically, he's been fighting in the provincial court. The provincial court said it was constitutional, then he appealed to the Supreme Court, and that's the decision we have here. Now, what does this mean? Like, who is this good news for? Well, you could say it's definitely good news for Justin Trudeau and his government. This is something they've been fighting for a long time to get. And also, it kind of like for the opposition parties as well. You know, all opposition parties, except for the Conservatives, support some kind of tax on carbon. So basically, they all have to fall in line on this one. It's hard for them to basically say that the government is wrong here. Whereas, you know, the Conservatives, I'd say they have a bit more options now because now we could tell that, you know, the tax is constitutional. This is something that, you know, if you're in the Conservative, if you're in the Conservative Party bubble, this is something that enrages a lot of people and probably will rightfully enrage them. So, I mean, there's a lot of action that can be taken on this. Now the question is where's O'Toole? Because, you know, O'Toole was talking about supporting some kind of price on carbon, and meanwhile you have Conservative politicians on the provincial level at least, and definitely a few on the federal level who don't want a tax on carbon at all. So, you know, it keeps the pressure on them to be kind of out of step. And so I guess, you know, the Conservative Party, they're at kind of a crossroads here. Like, we can just remember they are the only party right now that kind of doesn't support a tax on carbon. I don't usually count the PPC. They didn't play that big of a role in the last election, and I feel unless there really is like a big disconnect between Aaron O'Toole and the Conservative Party base, I don't see the PPC playing a spoiler role that a lot of people theorize they would. But this is the whole question, and I think the question is how strong, especially on the climate change issue, will the Liberal Party be? Because the best thing for the Conservatives to basically get ahead here, and remember, the 2019 election, they won the popular vote. They just had a very inefficient vote. So how the Conservatives can get ahead is if this Liberal support for the Liberals is soft, and there's signs that, it is kind of soft. It has the least level of confidence, so this is a probability meter here. So you see, they're most certain of where the NDP is. Liberals are the least certain, right? So you could say the support for the Liberals is kind of soft. You have a lot of people here who are maybe NDP who, every election they know the NDP guy's not going to win, so they go and vote Liberal, right? But the best thing the Conservatives can hope for is that Liberal support is kind of weak, especially on the climate issue, and that these other parties, NDP, the Green, and especially the Bloc, basically keep hammering the Liberals. But it's hard to say with today's news that they would be necessarily upset with what's happened. Every opposition party here, except for the Conservatives, is on the same page with this. So I think this creates interesting opportunities either way. First of all, Conservatives, they got to figure out basically where the climate policy goes with this, because this is a clear dividing line where they can say, we're against this. So then what are you for, right? And basically for the Liberals, it's like... it's vindication, I guess, for many years of basically getting horrible press on carbon tax and a lot of attacks that kind of attack the constitutionality of it. Now we can have a final decision on that. But, with issues like the climate, Liberal Party does have a lot of holes to fall into, with the pipelines and basically not having the most, out of these four left-leaning parties here, Liberal Party, they don't have the most rigorous environmental policy, but at least you can see now that, the policy that is on the record is constitutional, and that's surely a good thing overall for them. And so that's just my assessment of what's going on right now, and thank you for listening.